Hey, what's up? Silas here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about IQ and faith. Both the faith people have in IQs and what that determines about people, and also what people's IQ determines about how faithful they're going to be about things, mostly in the religious sense. Now, many things going into this. Why am I thinking about this? Well, I just recently went over Christopher Hitchens' Hitch 22 for my 10 nonfiction books that have impacted my life. And I went through a bunch of different kind of books and things like that, or videos of Hitchens talking and things like that, different debates, and going to like other atheists talking about the relationship between IQ and religion and what people do, like scientists. Then there was something with Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about how most Nobel Prize winners haven't been Republicans. Like how many have been Republicans? And then there's a connection between Republicans and religiosity and people who believe in Christianity. But this is, of course, before, and Neil deGrasse Tyson might not really admit or agree to this, but I do agree that people on the political left are also religious. It's more like metheist religions, where it's not necessarily just, oh, this is God. It's not the traditional ones, but it's more these other kind of religions, feminism, Black Lives Matter. Some of these things are memes and also religions and kind of statism, status kind of religions, communism, socialism. These things are not based on rationality. These are faith-based kind of institutions that a lot of people on the left support. But anyway, so he was talking about how there was a high number of Jews that actually won Nobel Prizes, and then he was looking back at why aren't there that many Muslims that have won Nobel Prizes? And that's a pretty decent question if you really, it made me want to think about this. Because why is it that the Jewish population, which when you're talking about the actual ethnicity, they are Semites. They're actually genetically quite similar to the Arabs. They're in the Semitic area. So when someone's like anti-Semitic, technically if you're against most of the Muslims coming from the Middle East, coming into Europe, that's anti-Semitic because these are Semites. It's a region thing. It's not necessarily just like a belief thing. So the Semites are not only the Jews. Now there could be a thing where you go in and you say like back traditionally the tribes of people who actually became that, the Semitic tribes were the ones who became the Jewish families, and there's like other tribes back then, so genetically there's differences. But I don't know. I need to actually go in, and I'm going to do a video soon about that with the actual genetics of the Jewish people. But when it comes down to this, I think he was making the claim that religiosity is a selective process of getting people to have lower IQs, or at least doing less in that sense, having certain limits, where he said this thing where he was like, okay, if somebody says this is something we can't actually ever know, this is something only God will know, that's going to limit them in a lab. They're going to get to the point and be like, no, we can't actually test that because we're never going to know that. Whereas if someone's like, anything we could possibly know, it's just up to us to find a way. There could be some limitations in that. So how much of the actual thought actually goes into actually changing the thing? Because when you look at this, that's what I'm trying to ask people, like, why is it, what makes a country, what makes a people, what makes a group have a higher IQ or have a higher ability of a level of achievement than these other groups? Why is it? I mean, it's kind of understood with like a skin color, it's due to the sun. It's understood that sub-Saharan Africans are going to have a different musculature than your average Japanese person. Pacific Islanders are going to have a different musculature than your average Scandinavian person. There are actual selective processes there that have these kind of things to select for your physical actual results. But when it comes to it, those physical adjustments are done due to very regional things. Where we can say, look, the winter in Europe, in northern climates and more further southern climates, although there's not that many southern climates, land masses in the south that actually go through winters. But so it's more the northern climates. They had those selective processes where IQ is mostly about time preferences. Being able to like, okay, I have 10 plants right now. I have 10 fruits. I'm going to eat 8 fruits. I'm going to know that's enough for my body to have its energy sufficiently, its energy needs right now. But I also know if I plant 2 of these plants, then in the future, these 2 plants are going to give me 20 plants, or 20 fruits. Then from those 20 fruits, I'm going to eat 16, and then I'm going to plant 2 again. So I'm just going to keep going with that. Of every 10, I eat 8, and then I plant 2. And then it's going to keep multiplying, and then you're going to keep having more and more. Whereas if you're not really having that kind of thing where it's like the fruits are always going to be here, so why should I limit myself? If I'm here in this savanna where there's always fruit, or the temperature is always there, the rains are coming, there's always fruit, the plants are abundant, the animals are abundant. I don't need to worry about husbandry of animals. I don't need to worry about planting, taking this time away and this energy to dig these holes and water these holes. I'm just going to get the plants. They're here. I'm going to get the fruit. I'm going to chase down the animals whenever I need them. So that kind of situation is going to select for different kind of behavior. So why would a similar genetic peoples of the Jews have a selective process to have them have higher IQs than the Arabs who are living in the same kind of area? Do you think it's based on just religion, or is it more the other selective processes that had, where there's actually some challenges that the Jewish population have had living in other places where they had to go to certain workplaces, they had to think, they were actually persecuted in a lot of places that they lived in, and that was a selective process. Now that's a more recent thing. I think that's a more recent thing that could actually explain why the genetic ethnic Jews are actually on average a higher IQ, because the ones who had lower IQs in those areas were probably more caught up in the programs and the pogroms and the kind of situations. There was people who were like, okay, we have to leave this area fast enough, or we have to hide our Judaism in a certain way, or we have to do these certain fields and be actually useful enough to these people around us so we don't get persecuted in these ways. There's certain challenges like that. Now, another challenge that I think occurred that could actually explain it could have been another winter, another potential demographic winter that selected for a lot higher IQs in white people in general, is just things like the plagues. Of course, the multiple wars that occurred also in the actual European areas, these full spectrum wars where a lot of people were being killed off, and then it was selecting for different people of higher IQs who were able to avoid both the disease and the human wars and these kind of carnages. And I don't think these kind of things have occurred in places like Africa. It was more your physical hardiness. There wasn't any massive wars. I mean, there was a lot of wars. I'm not saying people weren't killing each other, but these whole continental wars, just killing massive swaths of the population, I don't think that really occurred as much, at least not that I know of well. And the disease-wise, I'm sure there's diseases. Malaria is killing people on a regular, but the malaria thing is a common thing. It's just a steady cutting down of people. It's a steady amount of people are just always going to get this disease. You're always going to have this, no matter what. You're always going to get this malaria. So the stronger you are physically, in general, you're just going to live through this. So eventually, people who just can survive those steady kind of diseases kind of get there. And those steady diseases also existed everywhere else. But you didn't have an equivalent of a black plague killing out 2/3 of the population, was it? Who were living in certain areas, in certain cities, living together. The way these people were living in Europe were just tons and tons of people just living in one house. So one person gets ill, they're drinking the same water, the same filthy water. People are still defecating in the streets. This is dirty condition. So these things could have passed through and just killed off huge swaths of certain IQ, genetic quotient people, and then other genes that passed on. So this is just a complete, just random trying to think. If you guys think about the IQ thing, if you think it's a big thing, I mean, and I'm not saying it's not. It is important. But what is the ability? There's of course the ability of somebody having a high IQ and then being very religious, because those Ashkenazi Jews with those really high IQs are also very religious. So when you have a situation where Neil deGrasse Tyson is talking about there's a connection between religiosity and Nobel Prize winners, I'm like, wait, the Jewish community, okay, maybe the ethnic Jews, and this is the whole confusion thing. There's the ethnicity, there's the faith, and then I don't know, they don't have the Jews because you're an Israeli. You don't have to be Jewish to have that nationality. But there's those kind of different things in there. But if you have that, are the Nobel Prize winners secular Jews? Can you find a thing and find like, okay, the Nobel Prize winners are actually less religious, less faithful practicing wise than the ones who actually are? And I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this. This video might get banned, but just might get taken down, might get the strike. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand these kind of situations. Why is it, if they are genetically similar of a population, why do the ethnically Jewish Semites have a higher IQ than the ethnically Semitic Arabs? Or do they? I mean, if you guys have a source where it shows that they actually aren't, where there's actually the actual Semitic Jewish people actually have similar IQs to the people in Arab, or if you can find like the people who stayed in the Middle East and maintained the same level of religiosity as their neighbors, but then they were moved back after. So this is the whole thing. They were moved back there. Israel was reestablished after the World War. So what is going on there? What do you guys think actually was the main reason to get these genetically similar peoples to have different and kind of average IQs? And then we can also apply that to other groups now. Why would it be within? I'm sure if you actually went in, you could probably find in Africa different tribes. Here in Kenya, you'd find of the 42 different tribes, there's probably different average IQs. Now, it might just change by 1 or 2 points, but that's still 1 or 2 points. There's still going to be some kind of things that I think any figures that you can find to say whatever you want to define as white people and black people and Latino people and Asian people and find those differences in those tests, you'd be able to find that across pretty much any other grouping you have. So you'd also possibly be able to understand why is it maybe the Han Chinese are the actually highest IQs of all the Chinese in China. Or there might be differences between the South Koreans and the Japanese and the Chinese. And the people in Hong Kong might be entirely different if you have enough generations there. What I think is super exciting to see soon enough with the actual demilitarization and kind of rolling back of how much the Hermit Kingdom North Korea is, what would it be like to actually find out? Are there different significant IQ differences now between North Korean people and South Korean people? I think there's already been found that there's actually height differences already. Because I know, for example, once the West kind of westernized some places in Asia got more influence with Western diets, at least, it changed. Where you had Japanese people get, like, in a couple of generations, the average height was going up like an inch, 2 inches. I think it's gone up 2 inches from it was like 100 years ago. So I think that's one thing in North Korea that's already been shown, that there actually is a height difference between the average North Korean and your average South Korean. Now that would be very interesting to see, because the brain, as I've mentioned, is part of the physical ability. It's going to have a different capacity. I'm sure if your brain was just half the size it was, but still functioning exactly like it is, it's going to be more limited than if it was twice the size and you had a body to actually power it. So what's the optimum brain size for every body to actually power it? Like if I was 5 foot tall instead of 5'10", 5'11", or whatever, my head would seem and my head was the same size, it would seem a lot bigger. I already have a big head, but it would seem like a lot bigger. So is there also an optimum size of your body should be this optimum power source for your brain? So that kind of situation. So maybe if it was actually double the size and my body was still the same size, I wouldn't be able to power it as much and it would actually be more addled. Yet if it was smaller, it would be overpowered. I don't know. Maybe if my head was a little smaller, it would be more accurate and I'd be making this video better and making more sense. But I hope you enjoyed this video. This is just like an off-the-wall thing. And I'm going to have some more videos soon. I'm going to read this video where I found this paper on what it means to be genetically Jewish, or just the genes of the Jewish people, because there's a lot of people asking a lot of questions about the Jewish people, and I've always wondered, what do you mean by Jewish? Anyway, that's it. Let me know about the IQ thing. Have you taken an IQ test? What's your IQ? If you met somebody and you're dating somebody and you found out they had a really low IQ, would that change your attraction to them? Or let's say you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna marry this person, and you found they had a low IQ, would you like consider twice having kids with the person? How important is IQ to you, and how much do you think people's IQ has to do with the faith that they have, their religiosity? Goodbye. Now I know I'm going to have some kind of biases in this situation, because being a sub-Saharan African, if the IQ thing is so determinant, then just by default I'm in a group that's rather low on that thing. And now I know it's not every single person in that thing. It's a bell curve. You could have people on the higher end, you could have people on the lower end. But IQ definitely does play a part. Now, another thing about this is it's the kind of person as well. IQ is a limit, it's potentiality. Me, if I myself decided I'm going to go and hurt somebody physically, being the size that I have, the musculature that I have, I would have a lot more ability to actually harm somebody if I actually decided I'm going to do that. So if I was broken enough mentally to get to the point where I jump to anger, I'll be able to do a lot more damage. But if there's some Asian female who's like 5 foot tall, 100 pounds, and she has the same kind of damage in her mind to jump to actually being physically harmful as fast as I am, she would have a lot less of a limitation. I mean, she would have a lot more limitations in what damage she can actually do. So I think a lot of these things in IQs, we see certain groups and be like, oh man, these groups are really like doing bad things. But it's like, maybe they're just people, and then most of the people in that group that do bad things happen to be smarter, so they just do a lot more effective bad things. But the good things they do is also a lot better because they're a lot more effective at doing the good things, just because they're smarter. Just how if I was going to actually do something, help people lift a bunch of things for some positive reason, I would physically be able to do it a lot better than that 5 foot tall Asian woman. But if I was deciding to physically go out there and break things with my size, I would be able to do that a lot more effectively than that 5 foot tall Asian woman. Okay, goodbye.